Japan never realized Navajo Code Talkers delivered unbreakable battle messages that would turn the tide of World War II. Guadalcanal, 1942. Mud, gunfire, and the stench of death fill the jungle air. A young Navajo Marine clutches his radio, speaking words in a language that sounds like nothing the enemy has ever heard. Within minutes, Japanese positions explode under precise artillery fire. The enemy intercepts every transmission, recording every syllable, but they can't understand a single word. While Japan's best codebreakers crack every American cipher in hours, this alien tongue remains completely invisible to them. 3,000 Japanese cryptographers work around the clock, but they're fighting a language that has no written form, known to fewer than 30 people outside the Navajo Nation. What happens when an ancient Native American language becomes America's most devastating secret weapon? How did voices speaking in syllables older than written history deliver messages that saved thousands of American lives? And why did Japan's greatest intelligence minds never realize they were listening to the one code they could never break? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. November 30th, 1943. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The humid jungle air vibrates with distant artillery, punctuated by the staccato crack of machine guns cutting through palm fronds. A Marine runner crashes through ankle-deep mud, radio handset clutched against his chest, heart hammering against his ribs. Beside him, 19-year-old Navajo radioman Chester Nez kneels in the muck, his weathered hand steady as stone as he speaks syllables no Japanese codebreaker could ever decipher. Each word vanishes into static. Then, minutes later, shells rain down precisely on the ridge where Japanese troops mass for counterattack. Marines glance at one another in disbelief. Words, not steel, have struck first. By late 1942, Japanese cryptographers had broken every U.S. code based on English phrases, giving them devastating tactical advantages. The Navajo language had no written form, with only 30 outsiders worldwide capable of comprehension. 29 Navajo recruits initially trained to develop a secure radio code exclusively for the Marines. A shell hits the ridge. Smoke curls into the jungle canopy. The Marine runner exhales slowly, realizing some battles are won not by weapons, but by voices the enemy cannot read. Inside the Washington Cryptography Office, intelligence officers stare at stacks of intercepted messages scattered across mahogany tables. Japanese success in breaking U.S. Army Air Force's ciphers has thrown early Pacific operations into complete disarray. Every morning brings fresh evidence of compromised communications, troop movements anticipated, supply convoys ambushed, airstrikes rendered ineffective by forewarning. Intelligence officers confer in hushed tones around classified maps. Every transmission delay costs American lives in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea campaigns. The Marines, desperate for any solution, entertain an unorthodox proposal that sounds like military fantasy. Philip Johnston, a World War I veteran who grew up on Navajo reservations, suggests enlisting Native Americans whose language remains unknowable to Japanese intelligence services. His proposal seems impossible, using an ancient tongue as modern warfare's cutting edge. Japan employed over 3,000 trained codebreakers across its military intelligence network, far exceeding American capabilities. U.S. cipher delays allowed Japanese forces significant operational advantages throughout 1942's Pacific campaigns. Initial tests with Navajo recruits showed near-instant transmission capabilities versus 30-minute delays required for machine-encrypted messages. A teletype machine in the corner suddenly springs to life, mechanical keys striking paper with urgent rhythm. The message emerges in stark black letters. Enemy has cracked code. Seek immediate alternatives. Marines exchange tense glances across the cluttered room. setting the stage for a communication revolution no strategist could have predicted. The solution to America's greatest intelligence crisis would come not from machines or mathematics, but from human voices speaking words older than written history. At Camp Elliott, California, morning sun streams through barracks windows as Navajo. Recruits hunch over chalkboards, chalk dust floating in golden shafts of light. They're inventing code words that will carry entire Marine divisions into combat. Turtle equals tank, chicken hawk means dive bomber, whale represents battleship. Nervous laughter masks deadly serious concentration. Each phrase, rehearsed, could determine life or death on distant Pacific beaches. Philip Johnston supervises every session, ensuring each syllable will transmit clearly under combat conditions. The 29 original recruits work methodically through military terminology, translating modern warfare into ancient linguistic patterns. Beshlo becomes iron fish for submarine. Ne-hi-ma transforms into our mother for America. Each word gets tested, memorized, and rehearsed until transmission becomes instinctive. Chester Nez practices radio procedures until his fingers know every dial and switch without conscious thought. The marriage of cutting-edge electronics with ancestral language creates something unprecedented in military history, a communication system simultaneously ancient and ultramodern. A 211-word code dictionary forms the operational foundation, later expanded into a comprehensive military vocabulary. Trial messages sent flawlessly under simulated combat conditions impressed even skeptical Marine officers. By 1943, 400 Navajo Code Talkers received approval for immediate Pacific deployment. Chester Nez erases practice phrases from his chalkboard, watching chalk dust drift toward the wooden floor. The words disappear into powder. But soon, these same voices will echo across the Pacific in live combat, carrying messages that will reshape the war's trajectory. Each erased syllable represents future victory purchased with linguistic precision no enemy could compromise. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto leans over his polished desk at Rabaul headquarters, eyes scanning intercepted American transmissions that his most experienced officers cannot decode. Maps cover every surface, marked with red pins indicating successful Japanese intercepts of enemy communications. Hours of analysis by Japan's finest cryptographers yield absolutely nothing from these strange, alien transmissions flooding American radio frequencies. The mysterious sounds frustrate even Japan's most sophisticated signals intelligence teams. Yamamoto's staff has successfully broken every Allied cipher system within months of deployment, giving Japanese forces decisive tactical advantages throughout the early Pacific War. These new American transmissions sound unlike any European. Language, syllabic patterns completely foreign to trained Japanese linguists. Operational opportunities slip away with each passing hour. Japanese divisions misfire artillery because they cannot anticipate American movements. Coordinated attacks collapse when American forces seem to predict every Japanese maneuver. Communication advantage Japan enjoyed since Pearl Harbor evaporates as these indecipherable voices multiply across American radio networks. Despite Japan's sophisticated signals intelligence capabilities, no cryptographic team ever successfully cracked the Navajo code system. The operational edge gained by Americans ranged from 3 to 5 hours per engagement, decisive advantages in fast-moving Pacific battles. Japanese forces increasingly fought blind, while Americans coordinated with surgical precision. Yamamoto's clenched fist smashes against the mahogany desk surface, scattering intelligence reports across the floor. The communication advantage Japan once held in cryptography evaporates completely. His staff exchanges worried glances as their admiral stares at transcripts filled with sounds no Japanese scholar can interpret. The voices speaking in Navajo have rendered Japan's greatest intelligence asset worthless. Detroit's factory floors, hum with industrial machinery, molten sparks illuminating assembly lines of radios, transmitters, and communication equipment stretching beyond sight. Sweat drips from riveters' brows as they attach components that will journey thousands of miles to Pacific Islands, amplifying the voices of code talkers in foxholes and landing craft. The rhythmic hum of production lines mirrors the cadence of Navajo syllables being rehearsed simultaneously in California training camps. Women in coveralls operate precision machinery, manufacturing portable radio sets faster than any enemy nation can produce them. Each completed unit rolls off assembly lines stamped with serial numbers, destined for Marine units advancing across the Pacific. The marriage of American industrial capacity with Navajo linguistic heritage creates an unstoppable combination of technology and culture. Factory supervisors check production quotas against military requirements, ensuring every frontline unit receives cutting-edge communication equipment. The abundance flowing from American assembly lines contrasts sharply with Japanese industrial limitations. Enemy forces often fight with obsolete equipment, while Americans deploy the latest technology. Over 700,000 portable radios were produced by American industry during World War II, equipping every squad with reliable communication capabilities. Japanese divisions frequently fought with less than 15% of required communications equipment due to resource shortages. Every American squad could coordinate seamlessly with artillery, naval support, and air power through superior technology. Wooden crates, stamped U.S. Navy radio equipment, roll onto transport trucks, their contents linking Detroit's industrial might to Pacific battlefields. Each radio represents the fusion of American manufacturing prowess with Navajo cultural heritage, creating communication systems no enemy can compromise or understand. Marines land under withering enemy fire on Bougainville's black sand beaches. Mortar rounds whine overhead as Joe Kiyumia, a young Navajo code talker, clutches his radio with hands that refuse to shake despite the chaos surrounding him. Japanese machine gun nests rake the beach with deadly precision, forcing Marines to crawl forward through volcanic sand mixed with blood. Kiyumia speaks rapidly in Navajo, transmitting coordinates for artillery strikes with surgical precision. His voice cuts through battle noise, guiding offshore naval guns toward Japanese positions dug deep into jungle ridges. The syllables he speaks have no meaning to Japanese. Interceptors recording every transmission, they hear only mysterious sounds. Preceding devastating American firepower, artillery shells streak overhead with whistling intensity, impacting exactly where Navajo coordinates indicated. Japanese defenders, well entrenched in concrete bunkers, find themselves hit before they can respond or relocate. American troops advance behind walls of steel choreographed by human voices speaking in patterns older than written language. Code. Talkers transmitted 3-line tactical messages in approximately 20 seconds, while machine. Cipher systems required 30 minutes for equivalent encryption. Speed and accuracy of Navajo transmissions prevented thousands of American casualties throughout Pacific campaigns. Japanese forces could intercept, but never interpret the linguistic keys to American tactical coordination. Marine officers observed the devastating effectiveness of coordinated firepower directed by Navajo voices. Smoke rises from shattered Japanese positions as Marines advance with confidence impossible before code talker deployment. Joe Kiyumia continues transmitting coordinates, his ancient language delivering modern warfare's most decisive advantage. June 1944, Saipan. Ash-laden air and acrid smoke blanket invasion beaches as the largest Pacific amphibious assault unfolds under blazing tropical sun. Navajo code talkers relay constant streams of information, artillery adjustments, airstrike coordinates, casualty reports, supply requests, every message transmitted in syllables that transform chaos into coordinated military precision. Chester Nez crouches in a shell crater, his radio crackling with urgent communications from advancing Marine units. Each Navajo transmission synchronizes artillery batteries, infantry companies, naval bombardment, and close air support into devastatingly effective combined arms operations. Japanese defenders watch helplessly as American coordination reaches levels impossible to counter. The complexity of coordinating 60,000 assault troops across 15 miles of contested beach requires constant communication. Navajo Code Talkers become the nervous system of American amphibious warfare, transmitting hundreds of messages daily without error or delay. Their voices link every element of American military power into seamless, tactical unity. Artillery batteries fire 22,000 rounds during Saipan's first week, nearly every shell directed through Navajo transmissions. Code Talkers' accuracy dramatically increased American firepower effectiveness while reducing friendly fire incidents. Marine commanders recognize these linguistic specialists as indispensable battlefield assets. Marine Colonel listens as Chester Nez coordinates simultaneous artillery strikes from 3 different fire bases, his Navajo words orchestrating destruction with mathematical precision. The colonel whispers to his aide, "These men have become our most reliable weapon," cementing Code Talkers' strategic importance in Pacific warfare. Ancient voices guide modern warfare toward inevitable American victory. Japanese garrisons across Saipan struggle desperately with dwindling food supplies and ammunition shortages that worsen daily. Every attempt to counterattack American positions gets disrupted by precise coordination impossible to predict or prevent. The stark contrast between American abundance and Japanese scarcity becomes more pronounced as battle intensity increases. U.S. naval convoys deliver thousands of tons of supplies daily to invasion beaches, maintaining constant flow of ammunition, food, medical supplies, and equipment replacements. Radio-coordinated logistics ensure American forces remain fully supplied while Japanese defenders slowly starve in isolated positions throughout Saipan's mountainous interior. Japanese forces often operate with less than 15% of intended rations and ammunition allocations due to severed supply lines. American submarines and aircraft systematically destroy Japanese supply convoys, while Code Talker coordinated operations prevent effective resupply efforts. The mathematical certainty of American victory becomes evident in logistics statistics. Supply shortages force Japanese commanders to ration ammunition severely, limiting defensive firepower precisely when American pressure intensifies. Meanwhile, American forces expend ammunition freely, knowing constant resupply maintains tactical advantages in every engagement. The disparity in available resources determines battle outcomes before fighting begins. Japanese soldier peers through jungle foliage at American transport planes, unloading supply crates marked with English letters he cannot read. The abundance flowing onto American-controlled beaches contrasts sharply with his unit's empty rice bowls and limited ammunition. He realizes his forces fight not just superior numbers, but superior resources that ensure American victory, regardless of Japanese courage or tactical skill. February 1945, Iwo Jima. Volcanic ash blackens the sky while sulfur fumes make breathing painful for Marines clawing toward Mount Suribachi under the most concentrated enemy fire in Pacific War history. Chester Nez and fellow Code Talkers transmit continuously for 48 hours, coordinating artillery barrages, airstrikes, and naval bombardment that slowly reduces Japanese defenses to rubble. 8 square miles of volcanic rock contain 22,000 Japanese defenders in elaborate tunnel systems designed to inflict maximum casualties on American attackers. Every yard forward costs American lives, but Navajo voices guide supporting firepower with precision that minimizes casualties while maximizing destructive effectiveness against enemy positions. Mortar rounds whistle overhead as Code Talkers maintain communication links between advancing infantry and supporting units. Their transmissions coordinate the most intense artillery bombardment in Marine Corps' history. Naval guns, howitzers, mortars, and aircraft delivering synchronized destruction. Guided by ancient syllables, no enemy can. Interpret over 800 messages were transmitted by Code Talkers during Iwo Jima operations without a single transmission. Error. U.S. artillery units fired 22,000 shells, nearly all directed through Navajo coordinate transmissions. Estimated casualties without code talker coordination would have been 2 to 3 times higher. General Howard Connor later stated, "Without the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." The American flag rises on Mount Suribachi's peak, secured by voices speaking in patterns older than written history. Victory belongs to ancient words guiding modern warfare toward its inevitable conclusion. Washington, D.C., 1945. Military analysts examine detailed campaign reports in Pentagon offices lined with maps showing American advances across the Pacific. Statistical evidence of Navajo Code Talkers' contribution becomes mathematically undeniable: transmission speed, coordination accuracy, and tactical effectiveness that saved thousands of American lives while shortening the Pacific War's duration. Numbers tell stories of strategic transformation impossible to ignore. Messages transmitted 60 times faster than mechanical cipher systems. Battle coordination reduced from hours to minutes. Artillery accuracy increased exponentially through rapid target adjustment. Each statistic represents human lives preserved through linguistic innovation that rendered enemy intelligence capabilities obsolete. Casualty projections without code talker communication support reveal sobering alternatives: Pacific campaigns, extending months longer with dramatically higher American losses. The mathematical weight of linguistic warfare demonstrates how cultural heritage became strategic advantage, transforming ancient voices into modern military necessity. Communication speed reduced average battle duration and minimized casualties through superior coordination capabilities. Transmission accuracy prevented friendly fire incidents while maximizing destructive effectiveness against enemy positions. Statistical analysis confirms code talkers as force multipliers whose impact exceeded conventional weapon systems. Military historians surround chalkboards covered with figures representing the human cost of warfare, reduced through technological and cultural innovation. Each calculation demonstrates how abstract production statistics translated into preserved American lives. The numbers transform individual heroism into strategic insight, revealing how ancient wisdom guided modern victory towards its mathematical certainty. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Code talkers return home to reservations and cities across America, their heroic service classified at the highest security levels. Veterans resume civilian occupations, many returning to traditional Navajo communities, carrying secrets they cannot share even with family members. Recognition for their contributions remains delayed for decades, while their impact on victory stays embedded permanently. In Marine Corps institutional memory, Chester Nez folds his Marine uniform carefully in a wooden trunk, the weight of unseen victories still resting heavy on his shoulders. The medals he earned remain classified, his service record stamped with security classifications that prevent public acknowledgement. He returns to reservation, life-carrying stories he cannot tell about words that saved American lives post-war. Secrecy requirements mean even immediate family members remain unaware of code talkers' strategic contributions to Pacific victory. The Navajo language returns to traditional uses while its military applications disappear into classified archives. Cultural pride mixes with frustration over delayed recognition for service that changed warfare's fundamental nature. Over 400 Navajo served as code talkers throughout Pacific campaigns, with 13 killed in action defending American positions. Declassification processes beginning in 1968 slowly revealed their contributions to military historians. Congressional recognition and medal ceremonies occurred decades after victory was secured through their linguistic heritage. Chester Nez stores his uniform beside traditional Navajo artifacts, symbols of cultural continuity that provided strategic advantage when democracy needed defending. His service remains proof that American strength emerges from cultural diversity rather than military tradition, demonstrating how ancient wisdom secured modern freedom. Modern ceremony at Marine Corps headquarters honors surviving. Navajo Code Talkers as congressional gold medals recognize their delayed but undeniable contributions to American victory. Elderly veterans stand alongside active duty Marines, bridging generations through shared respect for service that transformed linguistic heritage into strategic advantage during democracy's greatest trial. The Navajo Code remains historically significant as the only World War II cipher system. Japan never successfully compromised. Modern military communications incorporate lessons learned from code talker operations, demonstrating how cultural diversity strengthens rather than weakens American military effectiveness. Their legacy continues influencing secure communications development and strategic thinking. Congressional recognition acknowledges not just individual heroism, but systematic proof that American pluralism creates strategic advantages totalitarian systems cannot replicate. The ceremony celebrates cultural heritage as military asset, validating democratic principles through battlefield effectiveness impossible in homogeneous societies. Navajo language preservation efforts receive renewed support as communities recognize their linguistic heritage's historical military significance. Modern cyber warfare specialists study code talker operations for insights into secure communications that remain relevant to contemporary conflicts. Ancient voices guide modern strategic thinking toward future applications. Surviving code talkers and Marine veterans form a ceremonial circle, voices raised in traditional Navajo prayers that echo across Marine Corps' parade grounds. Their words represent living connections between ancient cultural wisdom and modern military necessity, demonstrating how American democracy's greatest strength emerges from diversity that enriches rather than divides national purpose. The circle completes, but their legacy endures in every secure transmission protecting American forces worldwide. The war ended, but the voices that carried across Pacific battlefields did not fade. They lingered, not on open radio waves, but deep in the memories of the men who had spoken them, ancient syllables bound to modern radios, words that had transformed the course of history. The Navajo Code Talkers returned from the Pacific in 1945 not as public heroes, but as quiet veterans, their greatest achievement locked behind classified files and sealed orders. For decades, their families, neighbors, and even fellow veterans would not know the scale of what they had done. The Marine Corps had built its Pacific triumphs on their words. From Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, from Tarawa to Okinawa, the Navajo language became the nervous system of America's military machine, transmitting orders faster and more securely than any machine-based cipher of the era. Yet when these young Marines came home, they carried only silence. They were sworn to secrecy, forbidden to speak of the code they had created, forbidden even to tell their families why radios had always been in their hands during battles. Their medals bore no explanation. Their service records concealed the truth. And so, for nearly a generation, their story slept. For many, the transition back to civilian life was harsh. The Navajo Nation, like much of rural America, faced poverty, unemployment, and limited opportunities after the war. Code talkers who had guided divisions across Saipan and Iwo Jima now returned to herding sheep, farming corn, or laboring in railroads and mines. Some sought education under the GI Bill, though few institutions truly understood or supported Native veterans. Others wrestled with trauma, memories of jungle combat, of comrades lost, of words spoken into static that had summoned firestorms upon enemy lines. The silence imposed by military secrecy made healing harder. How do you speak of what you cannot reveal? How do you honor fallen brothers without telling anyone what they did? Chester Nez, one of the original 29 Code Talkers, later described the isolation of those early years. He had returned to the reservation, tried to resume ordinary life, but the war was never far away. He carried images of shell craters and jungle ridges in his sleep, his Marine uniform folded in a trunk at the foot of his bed. The very language that had brought victory was also the one thing he could not share. For decades, he and his fellow code talkers bore their burden in silence, each man a living archive of a story America had not yet told. The secret finally began to lift in 1968, more than 20 years after the guns had fallen silent. The Department of Defense declassified the program, acknowledging for the first time the decisive role Navajo Code Talkers had played in the Pacific War. Historians began piecing together the fragments of reports, interviews, and recollections. For the first time, America heard about the voices that had spoken words older than written history, words that had saved countless lives. Recognition came slowly. At first, only military scholars and a handful of journalists gave the story attention. The broader public remained unaware, caught up in the turbulence of Vietnam, civil rights struggles, and cultural change. Yet among the Navajo themselves, the declassification opened a path toward long-delayed pride. Families who had once wondered why their fathers and grandfathers never spoke of their service now understood. The silence had been one of duty, not neglect. By the 1980s, ceremonies began to honor surviving code talkers. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan declared August 14th National Navajo Code Talkers Day. Yet it was not until 2000 that Congress formally recognized their service with the Congressional Gold and Silver Medals. President George W. Bush hosted a White House ceremony presenting gold medals to the original 29 and silver medals to subsequent code talkers. Frail with age but resolute in pride, surviving veterans stood before the nation at last, their long-silenced story finally acknowledged. The code itself was never broken. Japanese intelligence, with its thousands of trained cryptographers, never deciphered even a single message. It remains one of the only truly unbreakable codes in modern military history. But the deeper legacy is not only technical, it is cultural. The Navajo language, once targeted by assimilation policies that punished children for speaking it in schools, became the backbone of Allied victory. A language once dismissed as primitive became in wartime America's most sophisticated cryptographic weapon. This irony still resonates. Many code talkers had grown up in government boarding schools where they were beaten for using Navajo instead of English. Yet it was precisely the survival of their mother tongue that allowed the Marines to create an unbreakable code. Their resilience in preserving their language against systemic suppression became the foundation of their wartime heroism. Without Navajo, the Pacific War might have unfolded very differently. Today, efforts to preserve and revitalize the Navajo language often invoke the code talker's story. Language programs on the reservation teach children that their words are not relics, but living heritage, once powerful enough to change world history. The memory of the code talkers affirms that cultural identity is strength, not weakness, that diversity enriches a nation's power rather than diminishes it. The code talker's story is also one of brotherhood. In the mud of Guadalcanal, the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, and the jungles of Bougainville, Navajo Marines fought alongside men from every corner of America, farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, fishermen from California. The bonds formed in combat transcended race, culture, and background. Yet the code talkers also carried the unique burden of dual service. They fought not only as Marines, but as guardians of a language their people had carried for centuries. The trust placed in them by the Marine Corps was profound. Commanders came to rely on Navajo transmissions as their most dependable lifeline. Colonel Howard Connor of the 5th Marine Division famously declared that, were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. Such statements were not hyperbole. In battles where every minute mattered, the code talkers' speed and accuracy saved thousands of lives. Their comrades recognized this in the field, even if the broader nation did not. Marines on the ground knew that when the radio crackled with Navajo words, artillery would fall exactly where needed. Pilots knew that close air support would strike with deadly precision. Soldiers under fire learned to associate the rapid syllables of Navajo with survival. These memories, carried home by veterans across America, helped ensure that when the story finally emerged, it was told with reverence as the decades passed. Fewer code talkers remained to tell their story firsthand. Time, the final battlefield, claimed one veteran after another. Those who lived into old age carried memories etched into their souls. Memories of transmitting messages under fire, of brothers who never came home, of a secret that weighed heavily for half their lives. Yet they also carried pride. They knew they had turned their language into a shield for their comrades and a sword against an enemy. For many, the belated recognition brought healing. Medals, ceremonies, and tributes could not erase years of silence, but they affirmed that the sacrifices had mattered. Schools, museums, and monuments began to enshrine their story. In Window Rock, Arizona, the Navajo Nation built a Code Talkers Memorial. Across the United States, plaques and statues honor their contributions. Hollywood films and documentaries carried their story to global audiences. What had once been hidden became celebrated, but even recognition carries complexity. The Code Talkers' legacy exists alongside the broader history of Native Americans in the 20th century, a history marked by struggle for sovereignty, land rights, and cultural survival. Many veterans returned from service to face discrimination at home. The nation that had relied on their language in war still marginalized their communities in peace. This paradox underscores the depth of their service. They fought for a country that did not fully embrace them, and yet they gave that country one of its most decisive advantages. In an era of digital encryption and cyber warfare, the Code Talkers' story still offers lessons. It reminds us that secure communication is not only about machines, but also about creativity, culture, and human ingenuity. It shows that strength often lies in unexpected places, that a language preserved in remote mesas and canyons could outwit the world's most sophisticated cryptographers. It affirms that diversity, far from being a vulnerability, can be a nation's greatest resource. Military academies today study the Code Talkers not only as a historical curiosity, but as a model of adaptive thinking. Their success demonstrates that security comes not only from complexity, but also from cultural uniqueness. In a globalized world where information can be hacked, intercepted, or decoded by machines, the Code Talkers' Unbreakable system remains a rare example of human communication triumphing where technology faltered. At Marine Corps ceremonies in recent decades, surviving Code Talkers stood shoulder to shoulder with young Marines, their weathered hands raised in salute. Their voices, once carried by static across Pacific Islands, now rose in prayers and songs. These gatherings created a circle across generations, the young honoring the old passing down wisdom to the young. In these circles, the legacy of the Code Talkers endures, not just as military history, but as living heritage. Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, passed away in 2014. At his funeral, Marines in dress blues stood alongside Navajo elders in traditional dress, their presence a fusion of two worlds the Code Talkers had bridged. They laid to rest not just a man, but a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and service. His folded flag rested beside Navajo artifacts, each representing part of his identity: warrior, Marine, Navajo, American. As the last living Code Talkers pass on, the responsibility of memory shifts to us. Their story must not fade into abstraction nor be reduced to a brief footnote in textbooks. It must live in classrooms, in tribal ceremonies, in museums, and in the digital archives of a new century. It must be retold by teachers and parents, reenacted in films and novels invoked by linguists and soldiers alike. It must serve as proof that strength comes not only from weapons, but from the endurance of words. Each new generation bears a duty to protect this legacy. To the Navajo people, it means safeguarding their language, ensuring that children still hear it spoken in homes, still sing songs and say prayers in the tongue that once baffled the world's most determined code breakers. To the broader United States, it means honoring diversity as a foundation of national resilience, recognizing that the voices of minority cultures can become the instruments of national survival. To the global community, it means acknowledging that indigenous knowledge, whether linguistic, ecological, or spiritual, has value far beyond what empires and armies often realize. The story of the Code Talkers is therefore not closed. It continues each time a child on the Navajo Nation opens a primer in Dinebizad, each time a Marine learns about Iwo Jima and hears that victory was guided by voices from desert homelands thousands of miles away. Each time an elder shares memory with a younger relative who never saw war but carries its inheritance. As we step deeper into the 21st century, with its wars fought in cyberspace and its codes written in algorithms, the Navajo Code Talkers remind us of something timeless. The most unbreakable code is the bond between people and their culture, the link between identity and resilience. Their voices were never merely tactical signals. They were living testaments of survival, carved in syllables that endured centuries of adversity. So, when we recall the circle of Marines and elders, hands lifted in salute and prayer, we are reminded that the circle does not end. It widens with each retelling, drawing in all who honor the lesson that freedom, like language, survives only if we choose to keep it alive. The Navajo Code Talkers' legacy now travels beyond battlefields, beyond reservations, and beyond the borders of the United States. It echoes in international discussions of indigenous rights, where their example demonstrates that cultural survival is not only a matter of dignity, but of global significance. Their story has become a bridge between worlds, between native traditions and modern states, between wartime necessity and peacetime remembrance, between the voices of elders and the questions of youth. Universities teach courses on native languages and cryptography, often beginning with the tale of the Code Talkers. Museums dedicate exhibitions that draw visitors from around the globe, each person struck by the revelation that an ancient oral tradition held the key to modern victory. Authors, playwrights, and filmmakers continue to draw inspiration from the story, weaving it into cultural memory. Every retelling strengthens the circle, and yet, the most profound continuation happens quietly, in Navajo homes where grandparents teach words to grandchildren, in schools where Dene children hear their language valued rather than suppressed, in ceremonies where sacred songs remind a people of their resilience. In these moments, the legacy of the Code Talkers is not only remembered, but lived. The responsibility of memory is heavy, but it is also a gift. To carry the Code Talkers' story is to carry proof that no voice is too small, no culture too marginalized, no tradition too obscure to shape the destiny of nations. Their voices once cut through the static of war. Today they cut through the static of forgetfulness. And as long as we continue to listen, they will never be silenced. If you enjoyed the story I handpicked, this next story that you will enjoy, please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.